Okay, today we begin our fall session of the classes, and so we're going to be studying the book of Ecclesiastes. Now, Ecclesiastes is a book that we don't hear quoted very often. Sometimes we do, but not too often. And it is a book, excuse me, that is not going to tell us anything of a doctrinal nature. It's not going to be dealing with the feast days or anything of the Old Testament or the doctrine of the New Testament, but it is something that will change your attitude. And so I guess if I were going to describe it, I would say it is an attitude changer. That once you study the book of Ecclesiastes, never again do you look at life in the same way that you did before. It just comes out and you say, what did I learn? Well, the major thing is that I learned that life is not what I thought it was. That there is a different purpose, there's a different way of receiving happiness and so forth and so on. And so life just changes. So it's an attitude changer, really, when we begin to look at the book of Ecclesiastes. Now, as we open the book and look at it, why we find that you look and it'll say Ecclesiastes or the preacher. Now, that's the name of it, but what we find is that it's the name of a book that contains maxims or proverbs or short sayings or short teachings, just one after the other, for the purpose of cultivating wisdom in this life, so that we can go through life trying to cultivate and accumulate wisdom and about the way that we should live. Now, it starts out, and the reason it's called Ecclesiastes is because that the first word here is the words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. So you say, well, where is Ecclesiastes there? All right, as you can see down here, I've got ek and Colleen. Now, Ecclesiastes comes from these two words. Ecclesiastes, ek, in the Greek, means out. And Colleen means to call. And so if we were talking in the Greek language, as they did back in those days, why, I might say, ask somebody, I'd say, hey, would you go call somebody out? And so I want you to go call them out of that classroom and come in here. Well, I would use those words, ek Colleen. Oliver, would you ek Colleen this guy out of this class? And so it means to call out. Then we say, well, what would you say about the person who is calling out? What would you call him? So we send Oliver in to call out this person. Now then, what would we call Oliver? Well, we might call him, there's no word in English like this, but if you were looking at it in this way, the one who calls out, the caller-outer, if you want to put it this way. Who is it that went in and called out? So then we would call him then the ekkaliner, the one who calls out. So now this is how we get this word, and it's how we get the word for preacher. The book of Ecclesiastes is a book of where we're going to call out, and Solomon is going to say, listen to me, here is what life is about. He's calling out. And so it's called then the book that's calling out and telling people how to live. So then, here you have the words of the preacher, the words of the one who calls out. So that's how you get those two words, and when you see it in your Bible, it'll say up there, the title generally says Ecclesiastes or the preacher. They're both the same thing. Ecclesiastes is a Greek word, preacher is an English word, and they are really both meaning the same thing. Now, for those of you who've heard 10,000 times, the Greek word for the word church you'd say, well, isn't that word ecclesia? And it is. So now the Greek word for church is ecclesia. Do you see that in Ecclesiastes, ecclesia? Now, ecclesia means the people who are called out. So here it is, we've got a message that's called out. We've got a guy who sends in and preaches the message that's called out. And then we got the body of people who are called out. Well, the reason the word church is used, and this word is used for that, is because Jesus has come, and he said, come unto me all ye that are heavy laden, and I'll give you rest. And so he started calling people out. Come unto me. I am the way, the truth, and the life. So Jesus was calling people out. And the people who came to him are called the people who are called out. And that is the word ecclesia. So you see all these words kind of tying in, and I just throw that in, maybe just to make it a little bit more interesting when you think, haven't I heard that word before? How about giving me a little air up there with these fans, please? Okay, so we take a look then at the book of Ecclesiastes, and we say, what's it all about? As you look at various books, what's it all about? The book of Genesis means the first things. It's a book that tells you about how everything came into being. How did the world come into being? How did man come into being? How did this and that? And what are all of the first things that happened on this earth? When we look at the word of Exodus, well, Exodus means the going out. So that's going to tell us about how the Jews went out and so forth. So every book has a purpose, and the title tells you a little bit about the purpose of that book. But now, what is the book of Ecclesiastes really all about? All right, as we look at it, first thing we notice as you're reading the book, the expression under the sun is used 29 times. Now you see this short book, not a long book, 12 chapters long, here 12 chapters, and it's a short book, and it's used 29 times. Now the expression under heaven is used 5 times. Of course, under heaven would be the same as under the sun, wherever it is that we're talking about that is here. And then the expression up on the earth is used 3 times. Now, that's what we're dealing with. Yeah, please. That's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with life under the sun. Life under heaven. We're not dealing with life up in heaven. We're dealing with life under heaven. Thanks a million. Well, where is this life under heaven? It's here on earth. We're dealing with life here on this earth. That's what the book is going to be about. Now, the purpose of this book, when you look at the whole thing, you put it all together, is it's to show that life without God has no meaning. Now, you can go through this life, and you can set God aside, and you enter into life with a certain attitude, certain disposition. You do certain things, and at the end, you're going to find life without God has no meaning. You say, I have accumulated wealth, I have done this, I have done that, and yet you're going to find out that has no meaning. It doesn't give you satisfaction. You look at very wealthy people, and you see how they came to an end. And so many times, these very wealthy people come to an end through suicide or depression and so forth because they haven't been able to find the meaning of life. They haven't been able to find why they're really here. So I've got down there in that paint, does this by examining how to find happiness on this earth without God. Now this is the interesting thing. It examines all the avenues people have always used to find happiness in life under the sun. Now here are the 4 major things. Wisdom. If I could just accumulate wisdom. Now I'm not talking about just a little wisdom, but if I could accumulate wisdom, let's just suppose that I could accumulate so much wisdom that all the kings of the earth would be seeking my advice. That everybody on earth would say, you know, that guy is the wisest man there is on this earth. Wouldn't that bring me happiness? Couldn't I be happy with that kind of a reputation? Or pleasure? Just truly having fun. I suppose all of us have thought about somehow or another being able to go out and live a lifestyle of just absolute pleasure. You go from here to here to here, and just absolute pleasure. Wouldn't that fulfill you? Now, he's going to deal with that. What about riches? You say, yeah, if we just had the riches. Suppose you had many times what Bill Gates has. Billions and billions of dollars. Wouldn't that give you a fulfillment? Wouldn't that bring some happiness into your life? It's so much that you know you could never run out. Or power. You just got so much power that when you speak a word, you can speak anything you want to speak. You can just say, I want a certain man put to death, and he's put to death, and there's no questions asked. And you're not guilty of anything. You have all that power. All right? Solomon is going to show you, I've done this. He's going to show us, these are things I have accomplished. And I set out to accomplish them because it appeared this would bring happiness. So he's going to show us that he had accumulated more wisdom than anybody who ever lived or anybody who ever would live. Now, you and I know how he got it. God gave him this wisdom miraculously. But of course, he has been known, is known now, will always be known as the wisest man who ever lived. And he's going to tell us the end result. He's going to tell us now, when you get that much wisdom, here is what it does to you. And then pleasure. He's going to say, I decided to try an experiment. I decided that I was going to try every kind of pleasure I could try without any limitation. So there's no limitation on expenses, and I will do anything and everything that I would want without any hindrance at all because of my riches. He's going to have so many riches that his house is just filled with gold, and so there's no limit. So he said, so I did it, and he's going to tell us what he did. And he'll tell us how he went into this, and you just shake your head and you say, well, you couldn't do it anymore. Or power, the power he had. He's going to say, now, I've tried all these things. I've done this. There's no man could ever come after me with more riches and power and do more pleasure and have as much wisdom. Nobody could ever do it. Nobody could ever do it. God has given me all of this divinely, miraculously. Now, I'm going to tell you what it's about. I'm going to tell you how you feel when you get through examining this. All right, now here's the key to the book of Ecclesiastes. You look up here and you say, the purpose of the book is to show that life without God has no meaning. The interesting thing is that the book of Ecclesiastes hardly even refers to God. You don't even see him mentioned. Every once in a while, there's an insinuation. Yeah, this guy does believe in God, but for some reason he's leaving him out of the picture. That when we try pleasure, we're not trying pleasure in order to please God. We're not trying pleasure with the idea of God in mind. I'm going to do anything and everything that would make me happy. Riches, I've got them all. I will expend them. I'll spend them. Now, not with the idea of how would God want me to spend my money, but I'm going to spend it in the way I would want to spend it. And so he's going to approach the book as though there is no God. So I said, now let's seek happiness on earth. Let's try to find how you can be happy on this earth without God. So that's what the book is going to be dealing with. And as you go through, you'll kind of feel a little vacancy in there. You may see some times when you say, well, I wish he would have mentioned God, but that's his purpose, is to show us here's what you feel like when you live life on this earth without God. So now he's getting ready to try all of these things, and it's not going to be until the last chapter that he gets down and brings God into the picture and gives us the real meaning of life. Now, the word vanity is a big word in this book. As you see in verse 2, vanity of vanities, saith the preacher, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. So vanity. Now, that's some word. When you begin to look at how he summarizes it all, and he starts out from the very beginning to tell you about the success in life. Suppose that you have all the riches and wealth and wisdom and power that there is, and you expend it all, and he's going to say, I did it wisely, I did it carefully, I did it by looking at what would really bring me happiness. And you do all of this, and you spend all of your life doing this, and then you come out and say, now here's what life is all about. I want you to picture Solomon in this way. The way he's going to show us is, he starts out with God giving him all of these things that we believe would bring happiness to us on earth. God giving him all of them, all this wisdom, power, riches, and so forth. Now, imagine him living to be an old man, and the newscasters come and talk to him. And, you know, that's the way they do. They ask these old people. They say, how do you attribute your old age? Or what do you think life is about? Or what? And so they're going to glean the wisdom from this. All right, here is Solomon. He's lived his life. He's done things that no human being ever had the power to do or ever will have the power to do. He's done them all. Now, certainly he's a man that newscasters ought to ask the question, what do you have to say about life? So he's going to tell you now, here's what life is about. Here's the conclusion. Vanity of vanity, saith the preacher. Vanity of vanities. All is vanity. That's what life is about. Now, what does he mean, vanity? The word vanity literally means devoid of force. It shows you something about it has no power. It has no success or result. Try as you may, and if you're laboring in vain, we've heard people say, you're laboring in vain, which means you're never going to reach a successful result in this. It means useless, to no purpose or vain. So what's life about? It really has no purpose. There's no successful result. We're all going to come down and we're going to die. And when you die, you're going to be unfulfilled. You're not going to have that fulfillment that you've been seeking to have, because all is vanity. Now, when we think about vanity, we could put three things down. Vanities mock men. When you get involved in a vain thing, you're laboring in a project that you can't get done. That kind of mocks you to tell you what you're about. Vanities are meant to mock men. God has placed this kind of life upon this earth so that we will feel mocked. And these vanities are meant to lead people to seek God. That's what the book's going to show us. It's going to show us that we really have no purpose. We're fighting a losing battle. Now, it's a whole lot better to learn that as you start out life than it is when you end up life. And when life is all over, for you to say, life is a losing battle. Now, we have all of these things here, and I'm going to talk about this in just a minute. Let's talk about this vanity for just a minute. What do you mean by vanity? All of us have been involved in projects to learn what we're doing is all in vain. Have you ever been working on a project on your automobile or electricity or plumbing or cooking or sewing or whatever it is, and you can't find the solution? You work and you work and you work, but you can't find the solution. And so you just keep working and working, but you can't find the solution. Now that's what working in vain is. Work as hard as you want to, and there's no solution. A good illustration of this, since I don't know much about sewing or cooking, let's talk about mechanical things. Have you ever had a bolt that you tried to get out and you're trying to loosen it and it won't come? And you try as you may, and finally you get a wrench, that's this long and you can't do it. So then you get a big pipe about this long and you stick over it so you're out here and you can put 100 times pressure, but it won't move. And then you go get your hammer, your sledgehammer, and you get out here and you start beating on that thing, but it won't move. Now you're laboring in vain. You call me and I say, oh yeah, just get out there and jump up and down on it. No, I can't move it. Well, you're laboring in vain. Now, generally, when it's like this, the reason is because for some reason or another, most bolts, 99.9 of them, have threads in them that when you want to loosen the bolt, you turn it to the left. But there are some things in this life of when you want to loosen it, you turn it to the right. Now, if this thing is, you want to loosen it and it turns to the right, and if you say, well, I know how to do it, you turn it to the left, and you're trying to turn this to the left, I don't care if you put an elephant out here. All it does is just tighten it up. You are laboring in vain. To show you how ignorant Scott is, I saw him this week, so it's a good time for me to squeal on him. But at any rate, I was having a dishwasher installed. Scott was over and we were standing there. And so the guy put it in, he gets through, and so got to talking, and Scott said something about, have you ever put one in and forgot to knock out that little tab? Now, if dishwashers, they drain, most of them, into a garbage disposal. And a garbage disposal has a little thing up here, and inside it has a little tab where water won't go through in case you don't have a dishwasher. But if you do, you got to take a hammer and a screwdriver and tap that little thing out. And if you don't, water won't go through it. When you turn your dishwasher on, water is going to go everywhere. And you're going to think you're drowning. Well, Scott telling, yep, I've done that, see? So this guy says, oh yeah, I did that. Man, he said, Bob, and so he starts talking, and so you start looking, and so you say, well, you're laboring in vain. The guy said, have you ever, I remember when I started on this job, I was putting in a hot water heater. And he said, now you know those things, down where you connect them, if you want to loosen them up, you turn them to the right and not to the left. Well, and so he started telling about how he did this and did it, and came off. I stuck my finger in it. Hot water came out, burned my finger. I jumped back, And so he's jumping all over the kitchen. What's the solution? He's laboring in vain. Steve, you know everything there is to know about plumbing. Why do they do that? There's a reason. I don't know what it is. So do you know why they, in plumbing sometimes like that, they put it? Okay, reason is technical, and it's to keep fools like me from getting hurt, right? That really is what it is. There's a reason. There's a reason for that. Now, it's good. This is the point I want to make. The reason is good. The reason those few little knobs and fittings turn the wrong way is good, and it saves lives. But with me, when I'm working, and guess why I get such a bang out of Scott making that mistake? Because I've made it myself. And so I know exactly how you feel. You're laboring in vain. Now that really is what you can think about as you go through life. So here I trot on the scene. I come out on the scene, man, I know what life is all about. I'm going to figure life out. And I might tell you a little thing here that happened to me. I put in several of those garbage disposals, but hadn't put any in for 15 or 20 years, I guess, and I had to put one in a couple of years ago. And so I put it in, and I completely forgot about that little tab that's in there. And so I put her in, and I turned the dishwasher on, and guess what happened? There was a big thing happened in my kitchen. And so I got it turned off, and what in the world? Here it is after I put in all these things. Oh, I remember now. Well, the whole point is, you labor in vain all your life. How do you want to go through life like that? Well, that mocks men. That makes you feel like a fool. And when you feel like a fool, that's good, because that makes you seek a little advice, and that then is going to make you go and seek God. Now, life on this earth is like that. I give you just this little example. That's just one little thing. But that's the way God has made the world. God has made the world so you are not going to figure it out. Not on your own. You're not going to figure it out without coming back and putting Him in the picture. Now, the whole point is, the teachings of this book about vanity are designed to wean us from the love of this world. That's the purpose. As you go through life and you have all these problems, you can't seem to find happiness. You've tried to find happiness in everything under the sun, and you can't find it. Finally, it weans us from this world. Designed to make us say, okay, if I can't figure out how to do it myself, maybe I need to bring God into the picture. Maybe He needs to tell me what to do, and if I follow His will, then I'll be able to do it. Now, in 1 John 2:15, you know these verses, all that's in the world, and talks about the various things and how that they are empty and vain. Matthew 6:19 talks about lay not for yourself upon this treasures upon this earth. Colossians 3:2, set your heart on things above and not on things upon this earth. So the Bible tells us all these things and explains it, but the book of Ecclesiastes is just dealing with it and showing us that you try it without this. Now, here's some things that we're going to be reading about. We're going to be reading about wisdom, labor, our plans, rivalry, greed, fame, satisfaction, coveting, laughter, and awards. Now, you look at these, and most of them are really, really good stuff. Wisdom, that's good. A whole lot better than being foolish. Labor, that's good for man to labor and make money. Plans, sure, let's make plans. If we don't make any plans, we don't have any goals. If we don't have any goals, we don't know where we're going. Rivalry, well, that can be good. In other words, we're trying to compete with somebody and that person pushes me and I push him and that's good. You move on down, let's say, to laughter and awards. Suppose you can find a life of laughter. Everything is happy. And awards. Get people heaping awards upon you. Wouldn't that be great? If your biggest problem was how are you going to find the time to accept all the awards that people are going to give you in the next year or two? So you look at it and you say, yeah, well, that's what Solomon's going to do in this book. He's going to talk about these things. And he's going to show us now, if these are the things that you think are going to bring happiness, here really is what is actually going to happen. Now, when you put it all together, what we should learn from this book is that life is not a hopeless end, but an endless hope. Now, it sounds to start with, like what I've given you today, that life is full of problems, and it is. And you're not going to be able to find the solution to these problems by yourself, and you're not. So it's going to be frustrating, and it is. And you're not going to have any hope, and you're not. And all these things are going to take place. But when you insert God in the picture, and that's what he'll do in the book of Ecclesiastes when he gets down to the last chapter, you insert God in the picture, then you say, well, we're not involved in an endless, hopeless end, but we're involved in an endless hope that everything is going to turn out all right. Okay, with that, we're now ready to start the text. So next week, we'll start the text in verse 2, and he will tell us about looking at life in an unusual way.